Can anything be practical and sexy? We know one manufacturer who thinks it can be done. That's this week on Motoring 2000.
TSN's Motoring 2000 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them, and Midas Car Care, the way it should be.
This week, Motoring has traveled to Nice, France, on the shores of the Mediterranean. Now, why are we here in Nice? Well, this is a spot that Volvo has chosen to launch its newest vehicle. Why Nice? Well, let's be honest, this is where all the rich, famous, beautiful, and generally cool people hang out. And as we all know, Volvo has been trying to shed its old stodgy image and become a hip company. The transition began with the C70 followed by the S80, but now Volvo is going to try and change the image of a vehicle that has been for many, many years the backbone of this company.
Why, surely you can't fit that entire load in one car? But of course you can. It's the utility wagon with over 1/2 ton of load capacity. Not only that, it's the elegant family wagon. Fast and economical, safe and secure. 60 horses, yes, the Volvo Duet does the work of 2 cars.
Since 1927, Volvo has had a reputation for building safe, durable, and dependable family cars. But as this Volvo video illustrates, the company knew their customer had changed. Yes, safety was still at the top of the list, but so was styling. And so beginning with the C70 in 1997, Volvo announced it was time to throw away the box and become cool. But could the same be done for a car that generates almost 70% of the company's business, the wagon?
And now, ladies and gentlemen, 2 new wagons coming from one proud company.
This was the scene at the 2000 International Auto Show in Detroit as Volvo unveiled the new generation of V70 wagons.
A car like the C70, for example, quite an easy car in a way, because it was a bit of fantasy, a bit of freedom, designers designing cars for other designers almost, but it was very much a personal thing. The new V70 was totally different. I mean, designing the next Volvo estate car, station wagon, you can imagine it's almost like being asked to look after the Swedish crown jewels for a while. It's such an important thing in Volvo and in Sweden. And here's a foreign guy being cheeky enough to say, well, I'm going to do this car. And, that was a challenge, I think. For once, people realize that a station wagon can also be used as a personal luxury car almost. It's more of a sedan with a bigger back for carrying things rather than a commercial vehicle or a truck. And I think people have realized, not for the first time maybe, but some have, that this is a possibility. To drive a station wagon on your own is, there's no embarrassment. It's not as if you're carrying a busload of empty seats like in some of the minivan designs. This is a car you can be quite comfortable on your own.
But I also think that the wagon has a youth appeal that not even we at Volvo have been able to precisely define. Like myself, when I was a bachelor, I drove a wagon. When I asked my kids, 18 and 20, if you could pick any Volvo, just get it, they both pick wagons, and they can't really say why. It's cooler, and so it has that dimension, at least in Sweden, and I think in some other markets too.
They don't call them wagons, they call them estate cars. But can a wagon be cool?
Well, that's the problem, and every customer survey I've ever seen says no. That this is a mommobile, this is a vehicle that only our moms wanted, don't want them anymore. However, I think the market has an opportunity for them in that sport utilities have got low quality numbers compared to cars, and they're not that fun to live with day in and day out. So for Volvo, there's a huge opportunity here to create or to rekindle interest in what has traditionally been a mom-mobile.
Well, this vehicle is the first wagon, as far as I know, that's not derived from a sedan. It doesn't share any sheet metal parts with the S80. It doesn't have the same wheelbase. It does not have the same track front. And so it's a purpose-built estate, because it's so important to us. We thought, let's not derive it from a sedan. Let's make it an ideal estate. So it's a brand new vehicle, although it shares beneath what you see, it shares a lot of systems with the S80.
We have great plans for Canada and the US. We have set the volume business target for 2004 to be in 200,000, which means a doubling of what we have done in the past 10 years. So we have very, very ambitious plans to penetrate the US and the Canadian markets.
I think the V70 is a very, very good car. There's no question about that. It's got all the features you could want in a large vehicle, but it's not going to be the features that sell the car. It's going to be the emotion that they can package with it to create an image for the company that says wagons are cool.
This is the Volvo report on man's inhumanity to machine. Boy, are you Americans rotten to your cars. You, more than anyone, need a car that's built with people's human frailties in mind. May we suggest a Volvo? 9 out of every 10 Volvos registered here in the last 11 years are still on the road. It's amazing. Simply amazing.
You know me, I've always been a middle-of-the-road kind of guy. Some surprising revelations coming up later on Kenzie's Corner.
An Oldsmobile in the pylon test. I'm kidding, right? No sir, on this edition of Test Drive we take a look at the second generation Oldsmobile Aurora. This time around, however, it's actually got a badge on it. Could that mean Oldsmobile are proud of this car? The Aurora's suspension delivers a decent blend of ride and handling characteristics using McPherson struts up front and a semi-trailing arm design in back. While similar in concept to the original, rethinking the front geometry, increasing the roll stiffness and upping both spring and damping rates delivers a car that exhibits little understeer and very good balance, as was witnessed in the pylon test. The rack and pinion steering delivers a fast response to input and a decent on-centre feel. Stopping power comes from a large set of discs equipped with the latest Delco Bosch anti-lock system. In terms of performance, the stops are short, straight and easily controlled. The reworked front suspension also helps to keep the bottom feeder mouth off the tarmac. Inside, the Aurora is very elegantly attired. The leather-covered seats, well, they're comfortable and supportive, and there's just enough wood trim to add warmth. But where they've really improved things is they've kept the number of buttons to a bare minimum. The climate controls are very simple, as is the radio. In other words, GM finally seem to be subscribing to the KISS theory. Keep it simple, smart guy. And when the cameraman laughs at you, it's difficult. The new Aurora is considerably lighter, almost 6 inches shorter in overall length,
and has a shorter wheelbase by 1.6 inches than the original car, none of which really affects the living space. The single biggest drawback with the previous car has at last been addressed, and that was the trunk. In the previous car, the liftover was too high. It's now acceptably low. It also had a very narrow opening and it was very shallow. In both cases, it's acceptable. However, they did not go far enough. There's no split folding rear seats. And these hinges, well, they crush anything placed beneath them and take up needless amounts of trunk space. And frankly, that's completely out of step with the rest of the car. Aurora is now available with two engines, the 3.5-litre V6 in our tester and a revamped version of the previous 4-litre V8. Both use 4 valves per cylinder and twin overhead cams. The V6 pumps out a respectable 215 horses and 230 pounds-feet of torque. Now, for the most part, this engine is more than up to hauling the Aurora around with reasonable gusto. Off the line, performance is good, as is the top end. It's in the mid-range that it doesn't compete with the V8 simply because of torque production. The new V8 engine is the choice, producing 250 horsepower and a healthy 260 pounds-feet of torque at just 4,400 RPM, 90% of which is available anywhere between 2,300 and 5,600 RPM. All of that explained, the one thing that this engine lacks is state-of-the-art technology. There's no variable valve timing. Now, while this engine doesn't hurt for that fact at the moment, down the road it will. It's something GM are going to have to address, and shortly, if they're going to stay with the rest of their competition. The only transmission offered is a smooth shifting 4-speed automatic that's as good as any offered. The shifts are almost undetectable, and when you need to press on, the kickdown responds quickly. In spite of my comments, Oldsmobile have indeed built a better flagship, one that represents a quantum leap over the original Aurora. And that was a tall order, because that original car, well, it was a good one in its own right. So quite rightly, they should be proud of putting the Oldsmobile badge back on the car.
You know, this is our first sport utility, and it's really the first platform that's been jointly developed between Mazda and Ford. It's a totally new platform, and we think we have a category buster for SUV, a whole new breed of SUV. It's larger than most compact sport utility vehicles, much more powerful with a 200 horsepower V6 engine, but it's also more maneuverable and responsive than larger intermediate truck-based sport utility vehicles. The competition for us would be vehicles like Honda CR-V, RAV4, Jeep Cherokee, but we think we might even get some customers who would, without any other option, opt for something like a larger intermediate sport utility vehicle.
Get a slice of the pie?
Oh, I think we can get a big slice of the pie. I mean, there's no other compact sport utility that comes close to 200 horsepower with a V6 engine. There's no other compact sport utility with the interior volume of the Tribute, and we think when people actually have a chance to test drive this car, they'll find that it's one of the nicest vehicles to drive. It's a hot segment right now, there's no doubt about it, and really it's one that we need to be in.
Well, you know, in Mazda's words, get in, be moved. Well, I got in, but will I be moved? That on a future edition of Test Drive.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns trading in a late model, low mileage car. One of our viewers wrote in and asked me, says he has a 97 Intrepid, and every time he goes to the dealer, they're trying to convince him to trade it in. The car only has 15,000 kilometers, and in my book, a 3-year-old car with 15K is barely broken in. I would not be considering trading it in, especially given the fact that he didn't mention a single problem with this car. Now, all cars can, as we know, give problems in certain areas, and they all seem to have their Achilles heels, that one area that's more of a problem than others. And on the Intrepid, it seems to be the air conditioning system that acts up most frequently. That's the area I'd be watching for problems, and he specifically asks, what should I watch for that's not covered in the manual? Look for problems in the air conditioning system if you're going to have them anywhere. But you know, my dad used to have a saying about vehicles and machinery in general, better the devil you know than the devil you don't know. Didn't mention a single problem, I'd be hanging on to it. That's my Midas tip of the week.
one of your driving pleasures is the chance to isolate yourself from the fast pace of the outside world, well, the Ford Motor Company has other ideas. Ford unveiled its concept vehicles dubbed 24/7 at this year's Detroit Auto Show. The design inspiration was obviously a box, but these boxes were actually computers on wheels.
Every age really has its sort of look. And if you go back to streamlining, that was sort of all developed around the idea of speed and technology. We're in the wired generation at the moment, and it's all about linking up, connecting, and communicating. And that's what you see behind me. This is not about horsepower in the traditional sense. This is a world of gigabytes and pipeline burst, and that's a very different type of performance. What 24/7 represents is a different look of how we use our automobiles. It's not only about transporting people and isolating them from the outside the world, it's about transporting people and connecting them while they're being transported. So we have a voice-activated internet system on the vehicle. We have telephone service, we have navigation assistance, we have safety and security links. This particular vehicle also has email and internet, all voice-activated. So you're able to totally communicate with friends, family, or business partners 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Well, I think they've basically lost their mind. Jack Nasser presented us with a program that basically said the car as an icon was gone. We would no longer measure performance and horsepower, but by the internet, and all we needed was a box with four wheels to take us from point A to B. I think it was a big statement of arrogance on the part of Ford to try to cram something that they want to do down everybody's throats.
They will be able to access Yahoo.
The car has tended to be an area where people get isolated, and with all the computer power that exists in a vehicle today, it's going to be a wonderful internet on wheels as we go forward.
People can't figure out how to drive with cell phones, let alone putting their eyes on the dash.
It's a little bit of lateral thinking. Everyone else at the show is selling sheet metal, and we're selling communications.
I don't know where they're going. I think they've left most people that were here kind of high and dry with just a pure statement of arrogance.
Now, the word practical is very seldom a part of your vocabulary when you go to buy a new car, but when it's your turn to do the groceries, well, that's a whole new matter. Well, among the many conveniences Volvo stuffed into this new V70 is one for the grocery shopper. We have the net, that's always terrific to use. We've also got this single strap that they've added. When you start to put the groceries in, you want to keep them nice and snug and secure. Comes in real handy. Pile them in, and it will take a lot more groceries than this, I might add. Put the strap around here, and you're laughing. So maybe practical is not the word. Maybe the word is convenience. And is that such a bad thing? I don't think so. All right, let's head to the garage and join Bill Gardner.
Well, Brad, maybe station wagon would be the answer for me, because I'll tell you, I think I need the visual prompting of being able to see all my stuff in the car. I made a really stupid mistake a couple of weeks ago. A customer dropped by the shop with a big pail of steaks that from a restaurant he works at for our dog Stella at the shop. I was on my way home, threw them in the trunk of the car, and totally forgot about him until 2 or 3 weeks later when he dropped by and asked me how the dog liked those steaks. All of a sudden, the smell made sense. I don't want to tell you what those steaks look like. Anyhow, this week we've got a letter from one of our viewers, Justin Pridham. He's asking a question that quite often gets asked around the shop, and that is, what causes the temperature gauge on his car to fluctuate? Is it the boiling point of the coolant or a faulty thermostat? In most cases, 8 times out of 10, it is a faulty thermostat, particularly in the times of the year when the ambient temperature is low, fall, winter, and spring. If the temperature gauge in that car seems to go up and down depending on how hard you're driving the car, it quite often is the thermostat. However, there are other things that can cause it as well, even with a properly functioning thermostat. For example, a lot of Chrysler 4-cylinder cars, if they have a leaky water pump or a water pump that's ingesting a little bit of air bubbles into the cooling system, or a shaky head gasket, they can provide some pretty wild fluctuations to that temperature gauge as well. Other things like a failed radiator in the hottest part of the summer can cause that temperature gauge to go sky high when you're pushing the car hard on the highway, or you've got the air conditioning on, or you're stuck in traffic. A non-functional fan or fan clutch can also cause this as well. The main thing is you want to make sure that you check out the root cause of a problem like this and don't ever let the car run to the point of getting into that red zone or grossly overheated, because in all likelihood you're going to do some damage to the engine. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2000.
You know, a lot of people think that the solid lines painted in the middle of our highways are the revealed word of God herself. Well, we went to a police station to check this out. The receptionist said, "You cannot cross a solid line. It's illegal." Well, frankly, I thought it was too. But the duty sergeant looked it up in the Highway Traffic Act, and guess what? There's nothing in there about solid lines at all. Oh, you can't pass on a hill or on a curve or within 30 meters of a bridge or a railway track, but on a clear, straight, wide open road like this, it's up to you. Now, I've driven with people that think that solid lines are divinely inspired. Maybe they're on a winding road, gentle turns that you can still see till next Tuesday, but if the line is solid, they won't cross it. They drive like they're in a slot car, just because otherwise they think they're breaking the law. All they're doing is making their passengers seasick. Now, I'm not telling you that you should go out and cross solid lines, but I've got no problem with cutting a corner if it makes things easier, provided you can see what you're doing. Because after all, it's your vision and your judgment that are at stake here. Are you going to trust yourself or some line painting truck driver who maybe just forgot to turn the switch off 4 years ago? Besides, if a cop does pull you over, at least in Ontario, you've got the law on your side. And by the way, it's not illegal to stand on a solid line when a truck goes by. It's just stupid. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Nobody has ever doubted that Volvo couldn't build a good wagon, and that's why they dominate 60% of the wagon market in North America. And this new V70 is simply the best one they have built yet. Their next big goal is to see if they can sell another 60,000 annually by the year 2004. And only time will tell. That's it for now. We'll see you next time as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 2000 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them, and Midas Car Care, the way it should be.